good afternoon, or evening. Welcome. Kensington Senior Living has 7 unique communities, 4 located in Virginia, Maryland, and New York, and 3 sister communities located in California. Kensington is truly privileged to support care partners and professionals from coast to coast. Kensington focuses on relationship-based care, care built on the foundation of our promise to love and care for your family as we do our own. That promise was what initially drew me to become a member of the Kensington family, as my father lived there for almost 7 years. It's programs such as the one you're attending now that are so important for those of us walking through a caregiver journey. Today, you are in for a treat as Braden Bishop will share with you his journey as a caregiver. I've known Braden for 8 years. Braden played baseball at the University of Washington and was recruited to the MLB. When Braden was in college, his father had a very difficult conversation with him regarding his mother, Susie. She was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. Susie was an amazing athlete and produced documentaries. Braden and his brother Hunter, both professional baseball players, founded a charity with the support of their father, Randy. The charity is For Mom. As their father said, each time you go out in the field, think of how proud your mother is of you. The boys began with a Sharpie and wrote on their forearm, For Mom. It went viral with the teams and coaches. They all had For Mom on their arms, as well as the fans. I am close to the family as I went to high school with Susie and feel blessed I was able to share some wonderful moments before her passing. Braden, Hunter, and Randy and I share the passion for Alzheimer's education and caregiver support. Thank you. All of our registrants from today will receive a copy of today's webinar in your inbox with links to connect you with For Mom charity and Braden's work. Please, during the webinar, utilize the Q&A function to share your questions with Braden, as we will have a live Q&A following the presentation. Now, please join me in welcoming Braden Bishop.
Susan, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for being with us. I'm so excited to have you here, and I'm just so passionate about the work that you do. And I love that how the 3 men in this family came together really to support the disease and just jump in. So the audience, you'll be excited today to hear from Braden. And then at the conclusion of his presentation, you'll see me again and join us for a Q&A. Thank you so much.
Perfect. All right, everybody. So I think I'm going to share a little presentation here that I worked very hard on. Hopefully we can get it. Okay, here we go. All right, perfect. You can go to that next slide for me. That'd be awesome. Perfect. All right, so just a little bit about me. I mean, Susan obviously introduced me a little bit, but I'm a former Major League Baseball player. I just retired in February before switching over to the dark side, which everybody calls it, and being a player agent now for the Boris Corporation. I got drafted in 2015 by the Seattle Mariners after spending 2012 through 15 at the University of Washington. So I got to stay in Seattle, which was awesome. Husky fans are also Mariners fans, so it was an awesome experience. And then I made my Major League debut in 2019. I might have one of the coolest Major League debut stories ever. I got to do it in Japan and replace Ichiro, who's probably the most accomplished Japanese player in the history of baseball in my first game. So that was pretty special. I would say along my journey in life, I'm a very passionate person. I jump all into the things I'm doing. I'm very focused. I mean, you kind of have to be to get to the highest level of a sport, especially baseball. In my opinion, the hardest to get to the major leagues. When I look back, I accomplished a lot in my career, but I think the thing that I'm most proud of is what I accomplished off the field. Susan obviously alluded to the fact that I started a charity while I was in college. And in 2014, my mom was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's at 52 years old. And at the time, I had no idea what Alzheimer's was. It was a far off thought of something you get much later in life. You know, people saying as they get older, I'm losing my mind. But as I started to dive in more, I started to realize how prevalent it is. And since 2014, it's come more to, you know, the spotlight, which is a good thing in my opinion. But after my mom had told me, I obviously went into a hole. This was the fall of 2014. Um, if you could switch to the next slide, and it'll talk a little bit more about my journey with For Mom. In 2014, my strength and conditioning coach at the University of Washington gave me the idea that it might be good to channel some of my sadness and energy into fundraising. And that was the first time in my life that I had ever been in a position where I could have some power as a collegiate athlete to fundraise. I always wanted to start a foundation, but I knew that there wasn't anything necessarily personal to me. So after my mom was diagnosed, we got the idea to have a charity deadlifting competition. Obviously, he's a strength and conditioning coach, so it worked out. Um, Somebody donated us their gym, and the time in their gym, we ended up having over 100 people. My whole team came out, but the most important thing was I was able to bring my mom to this event, which was in Seattle, and at the time we lived in the Bay Area. Um, she was hesitant at first, but convincing her to come might have been the change to her mentality of living with the disease, because it allowed her to embrace the fact that she had it and show her that she didn't have to be embarrassed because she knew people were there to support her. And I think that was extremely, extremely important. Shortly after this, my dad had texted me before one of our fall scrimmages, make sure you play for your mom today. And so, being the passionate human being that I am, I sharpied For Mom on my forearm, and it quickly caught the attention of my teammates, who then asked why, which I was able to tell them, and more in depth than just my mom is sick, but what she's dealing with. And at the time, I was educating myself on what this looked like at the time, what stages we're going to follow, and where it would eventually end up. We have at pretty much all college programs, you have sports information directors, which are basically the middlemen between the athletes and coaches and the media. They do a lot of other things as well, but our sports information director for the baseball team was this guy named Brian Tom, who I'll be forever indebted to, because he ended up sharing a picture of my arm to media, locally, regionally, nationally. And of course, they picked up the story because it's like a college athlete advocating for something bigger than himself, which I took full advantage of and shared this story. So that's when I really realized that the platform I had, I was going to be able to share the story and make a difference in people's lives. And I've always been somebody who's passionate about serving others. And I was bombarded with so many people's stories of them going through similar things. And so while they felt like I was providing this beacon of hope to them, they were actually providing it to me. And I realized that I wasn't alone as, a son, would-be caregiver, and that my dad as well, who was my mom's primary caregiver. Our story was picked up by Seattle Times, the King 5 News, NBC Bay Area, and on a national level, ESPN, Vice, Forbes, and The Athletic all wrote articles or did short videos, which was huge and raised a ton of awareness, which at first was the goal of this charity. But as my minor league career at the time progressed into a major league career, we were able to get featured on MLB Network, which was obviously huge in the world of baseball. And then my manager in Seattle, Scott Service, ended up making shirts that said For Mom with a Mariners logo on them. and they were only given to the team, but everybody wore them. There was pictures taken. I got donations from Robinson Cano, Kyle Seeger, Edwin Diaz, Felix Hernandez, all donated, and pretty at that point to me, pretty significant amounts, out of the goodness of their heart, and I'll forever be thankful and grateful for that. But in 2021, Form totally shifted. My wife played basketball at the University of Washington while I was playing baseball. So she gets a call in the summer of 2021, and one of her old coaches from Washington calls her, and the way he's talking, the way he's sounding to my wife sounded like my mom. He was forgetful, long-winded descriptions. He struggled to stay on topic. And I remember they got off the phone and nothing was really accomplished on the call. He was confused as he was trying to work through what he wanted to say. But I remember I told my wife at the time, it sounds like my mom. So a couple hours later, his wife ends up calling my wife back and clarified, what was going on, that he had Alzheimer's, that he was trying to communicate that, and knew that we had been through something similar. You could tell he was pretty far along, and it must have been pretty aggressive, for how he was. And at that time, he was 47 years old. In the months after that, we found out some pretty harrowing things, that he hadn't renewed his life insurance through his employer because he was forgetful and he didn't remember. And he was also embarrassed to share with anybody what he was going through. So at that point, it was too late and he couldn't get it. So after this, I came up with the idea that we would create a grant in their name and raise as much money as we could, and then put it into a disability fund in which they would be able to use for their medical bills and everything that would come, in their future, which we knew going through it didn't look good. They didn't know that, and they had at the time 4 kids under the age of 10 years old. So since that point in 2021, us along with the Morrison family were able to raise $125,000 for their medical and caregiving bills. So that was kind of the shift of For Mom, going from raising awareness to creating these grants for families, because we knew how tough it was. And then also we knew how tough it was going to be for the Morrisons. We're a pretty small charity, so it's not like we're bringing in, millions and millions of dollars, but people felt good that they could donate directly to a family. Because I think a lot of times, and one thing I really struggle with in starting this charity was asking for money is never comfortable. And when you can't share with people directly, like, hey, this is the type of, you're giving money to a family that's struggling, not, hey, you're giving money, it goes into a big pot, I don't know what I'm going to use it for. But it's to these families directly. And people feel good about that. And I feel good about that as well. And, I'm really proud that to this point, we were able to create the Morrison grant. And then also we've given another grant to a family in Seattle, not quite of the magnitude of the Morrisons, because they have a very powerful community behind them that helped us. But we're able to help directly. And that's the most important thing. And I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of the people who work for us and the work that they do. So I always love talking about For Mom. I could talk about it the whole call, just because I'm so passionate about it, and the service we bring to families and communities affected by this disease. But to what I'm going to talk about today is mental fitness. So if we go to the next slide, I want to talk about a little bit just how being a caregiver is a deeply rewarding experience, but there's also a lot of challenges that come with it. And if you are currently a caregiver, you know this. I kind of broke it down when my dad was going through it into 5 pillars: mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and social well-being pillars. And I did this because it created a very clear picture of what I felt was incorporated into caregiving. And if we focus on these areas, then it helps us and at least gives us a chance, because we're fighting an uphill battle. So we'll talk about practical strategies through all these pillars on the next slide. So if we slide over to the next one. So here's the pillars: mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and social. And then we'll go to the first one, which is going to be our mental pillar. So mental well-being is very important. I think I saw my dad struggle mentally, and it was pretty easy to see why, because when you're pushed up against a wall and you feel like everything's closing in on you and this hardship is going to last forever, you realize that you need to do more. You need to be more aware, more intentional with how you live, because now you are not only caring for your person but also yourself. So like I stated a little bit with my 4-mom journey, need to educate yourself. uh Learn about the ins and outs of Alzheimer's, the disease itself, how the brain works and neurologically, what stages they're going to go through, some of the things that you might come up against. Because if you're not a caregiver now, or you are a caregiver, there's people that have come before us. My dad did this from 2014 to 2019. Like, he'd be a great resource for somebody going through it now. So finding that, attending workshops, reading, connecting with others or groups that specialize in this, the experience of people, and learning their stories, their journeys, what they wish they could have done different. I asked my dad, when you look back, do you wish you could have done anything different? And what he provides now would have been totally different than what he provided back then. I think mindfulness is critical, and uh, you know, finding a presence in the midst of a storm is one of the hardest things you could possibly do. But if you can do it, it makes, when you get on the other side of the storm, the most fulfilling. And so I have a practical way, that something that I use, and I use it in the midst of stress. I mean, when I was playing the big leagues and you're playing in front of, 30 to 50,000 people, and you're having to perform, and there's immense pressure on you, you feel like there's an elephant on your chest. So some of the breath work that I would use would be an 8-second in, a 4-second pause, and then a really slow exhale. So it'd be like, and then you find the present. So you might feel like everything's going crazy and chaotic, and the person that you're caring for is yelling and screaming and won't put their shoes on, or pour the peanut butter all over the floor because they're trying to put it on a rice cake. These are some of the things that we went through with my mom. But to like find that moment where you can just take an 8-second inhale, hold for 4, and then a nice slow exhale, you'll find the present in that moment. You have to be intentional. You have to be aware of what's going on, because I think so often us as human beings, we're wired to just roll with the chaos. And at that point, we're in fight or flight our whole entire day. Next thing you know, you stack days of fight or flight, and now you go from 2014 to 2019 of fight or flight every day. It's not good for you mentally, physically, emotionally, everything. And then last, on the mental side, would be your mindset. Be realistic. It's going to be one of the hardest and most challenging things of your life to caregive. You have to accept that fact. You have to welcome the challenge. And when you're going through the storm and it's over, like I said, and you're on the other side of it, you want to know you emptied your bucket every single day for that person you cared for, because you owe it to yourself and you owe it to your person to empty your bucket every day, whether that be mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, social. You got to stack days positively. You got to accept the fact that it's going to be one of the hardest journeys of your life, but you can't give up, because people count on you. So you got to take care of yourself to get through it. All right, let's slide to the next one, which is going to be emotional. So emotional well-being. This is important because, and especially for men, I saw with my dad, and us men, you want to be so strong and get through it yourself, but this is not one of those times. You don't want to. So for all of us, I think it's important that we express ourselves. Like, it's okay to have feelings. It's okay to feel. Embrace what you feel. And it's important not to mask our emotions. Like I said with men, don't mask your emotions. Like, you're not going to tough this out. I promise you will not. It's too long a journey, too hard a journey. You need people with you. It's going to be hard. Find a friend, family member, therapist, and be vulnerable. That's the most important thing. When you're talking to somebody or around somebody, tell them how hard it is. Tell them you need help. You'd be surprised at how many people actually want to help. Seek support. Like I said, it's not weakness that we ask for help. No matter what it is, whether you talk to somebody, whether you share your experiences, whether you bounce ideas off people who are in similar situations. There's a lot of people caregiving right now. Find those people, find that community, bounce ideas off each other. It'll make you stronger. And then lastly, in the emotional piece is your self-care. You got to prioritize you time. Go get coffee, you watch a comedy show on Netflix, go on a walk. Most important thing, find things that bring you joy, because when you're in the midst of a storm, naturally our human emotions are always negative. So we have to be intentional and focused on finding the joy in our life, because it does exist. We just have to look for it. All right, let's slide to the next one. All right, spiritual. This is obviously going to look different for everybody. Some people are Christian, some people are Catholic, some people are Jewish, some people, are non-denominational, some people don't believe in anything. And that's totally fine. This is going to look different for everybody. But I'm breaking it down is it's gonna having something is gonna help you cope with stress. Caregiving is overwhelming, full of uncertainty, and finding a spirituality or a presence can provide a framework to manage the stress. And some ways of doing that might look like meditation, prayer, reflection, yoga. I mean, the list is endless. It's what helps you find presence in the midst of a storm to help you cope with your stress. Another way would be cultivating resilience. There's struggle, heartbreak, hardship, and engaging in this work will help you find inner strength and perspective. And like I said, it's intentional focus every day to help you find the perspective. And I remember telling my dad when we were going through this, I said, it's going to end at some point. And do you want to look back and regret how you acted because you gave up? Don't give up. People are counting on you. My mom's counting on you. I'm counting on you. Don't give up. Doesn't mean it's easy, but don't give up. Find the resilience. Connecting with community. If your spirituality is faith-based, you can connect with groups who provide support. And I've found that people have servant hearts. They want to serve. They want to be there for you. And you'll be surprised at it. If it's meditation or yoga, Pilates, find groups to join. Find the presence and purpose with a community. It's so important. Okay, flip to the next one. All right, physical. Arguably, in my eyes, the most crucial pillar. Prioritize movement. Whether it's a short walk, resistance training, this has to be a priority. And as a caregiver, you have a plethora of justified excuses. Don't use them. Don't feed into that. Go on walks, throw books in a backpack and squat, do push-ups, do planks. There's plenty of options, but movement is key. You have to move. You have to find ways to move every day. It doesn't have to be resistance training. It doesn't have to be an hour-long workout. It could be a 5-minute walk. It could be push-ups in the living room. It could be sit-ups, planks, whatever, but you just find a way to move. It's so important. Getting your sleep. So this one's very interesting. I think this should get its own separate category, but I'm going to put it under physical. Sleep has to be a priority, and there's plenty of research out there that shows that less than 6 hours a night puts you at risk for health problems. My dad went through some serious sleep deprivation because my mom didn't understand time at a certain point. and he wasn't sleeping because she would fall asleep, wake up and think it's 7 in the morning. It's actually midnight. So now he's not sleeping. Now he's having health problems, whether it be dehydration or panic attacks, whatever. And it looks different for everybody. So now he's having to take care of himself on top of caring for her. So we ended up bringing in help to the house that watched her at night so he could actually get a good night's sleep, because he still had to work, make money, and take care of my mom. So if you want to show up for your person, you need to sleep 7 or 9 hours. It's simple, but it's extremely important. The things that can help this: sleeping in a dark and cool room, wearing blue light blocking glasses when the sun goes down. This one's going to sound crazy, but it works, and there are more studies coming out on it. Tape your mouth when you sleep. You're going to force yourself to breathe through your nostrils, increasing the nitric oxide to your brain, which in turn helps you get deeper and longer sleep and rest. So when you wake up, you're recuperated, actually recovered. One thing that's really important, and more research is coming out about this as well, but your circadian clock is incredibly important. So when you wake up in the morning, going outside in the first 15 minutes of being awake is extremely important, because you're telling your brain that it's the morning, I'm awake, my body starts to wake up. And then wearing those blue blocking glasses when the sun goes down, especially if you have to be on screens later in the night, it's important, because now you're regulating your brain, telling it it's time to shut down, increasing that melatonin, which helps you fall asleep, stay asleep. If you do go outside in the first 15 minutes of waking, if it's sunny, only about 5 minutes. It can be longer, but 5 minutes, you're going to start to see benefits. If it's cloudy, you need about 30 minutes. And it can be more than that, obviously, as well. But when it's cloudy outside, you can still get that UV. So that will really help regulate your circadian clock. All right, let's slide to the next one. The social pillar, our social well-being pillar. Having community is key, because caregiving is isolating. So it's really essential to maintain your social connections. It provides emotional support through your friends and families and neighbors and support groups. It provides relief. And I think the biggest thing that you realize, that it helps you realize that you're not walking alone. It provides shared experiences. You connect with others on a consistent basis, and it'll help you learn how to navigate. It'll help you learn how to navigate. It'll also help you, because you'll learn how they navigated this struggle in their life, because we all struggle at some point. Might not look the same. We might not all be caregivers, but we all struggle. Like I said, caregiving can be isolating. It can lead to social isolation. So that's why making sure you have community is so important. And the most important thing to know is you're not alone. So let other people show up for you. It's incredibly important. Don't try and tough it out. You're not alone. All right, these last couple slides here. There's a lot of studies about these things. So I pulled a couple. Mental, there was a study done, a meta-analysis in 2003 of mental health on the effects of caregiving. That have shown that higher levels of depression and physical health problems show up in caregivers, which is not a surprise. So that's why it's incredibly important that you pour into yourself. Emotionally, a study in 2017 showed that there was greater emotional empathy in caregivers as it related to viewing the suffering of others, especially a loved one. And this led to worse mental health outcomes. So again, that's why pouring into yourself is so important, and being focused and aware and present in these times, so you don't just let it go and you focus on yourself, is so important. Spiritually, a 2021 analysis showed that 5 prominent themes to making it through adversity were being connected, strength, present, hardship, and duty. And so when we go back to that spiritual pillar, finding presence in the midst of a storm, being connected to a community, finding strength to persevere, and like your duty to show up for your loved one, incredibly important. Physical in 2016, there were 14 studies that were reviewed and that showed that physical activity significantly decreased caregiver distress and increased their well-being, quality of life, and sleep quality. So like I said, most important pillar in my eyes, you move, you give yourself a shot. Socially, a 2022 study showed that social support from a community was shown to override some of the negative effects from caregiving. So have a strong community. Okay, last slide. Just kind of recapping. Caring for yourself is an essential part of being an effective caregiver. Pour into yourself. You'll thank yourself when it's all over. By prioritizing these 5 pillars, you can provide better care to your loved ones. So by pouring into yourself, you help yourself show up, and showing up like in your best self, as your best self, you give yourself a shot. And remember, seeking support and help is a sign of strength, not weakness, especially for the men. If there's any men on here as a caregiver, ask for help. It's a sign of strength. And most importantly, take the time to nurture your own needs. Be kind to yourself throughout. Show yourself some love. Give yourself some grace, because it's not easy. It never will be easy, but don't give up. Keep going. We'll get through it together. So thank you for listening to this presentation. If anybody has questions, love to answer them.
Thank you so much, Braden. Your story really, I have some questions here that we'll start with from registration, but your story really caught me. My father also died of Alzheimer's, but sharing the story in detail sounds to me like that was so therapeutic for you and your brother and your father, because you and I've talked about this, is we have to take the stigma away from Alzheimer's. My mother was constantly hiding the fact that my dad was literally losing his mind, which is what happens. But I think sharing the story is so therapeutic for everyone's mental healthness. And what really affected me, that when your mother went to the event at University of Washington, the fundraiser, and she was reluctant to go, but her going and seeing the incredible community support for her was actually helpful for her. So if we can do more of these talks and let people know, we've got to take the stigma away. But I think sharing the story with friends and family, I just think is so important. And I think that helped your entire family with their mental challenge. I really do. And that your story helped others. And then that opens the door for other people to start sharing. And then they start sharing more. And then and maybe they involve their loved one that's affected with this horrific disease. I just love that. And the other thing I was thinking about when you did the breathing thing, I actually did an event years ago about stress relief and all that stuff. And that breathing technique works. And that's what the Navy SEALs use when they're out. You're maybe on the field, and maybe bases are loaded or whatever. And you're thinking, okay, this is my opportunity. I got to breathe now to bring myself back to the presence. But the Navy SEALs actually use that too. And then one last comment, I was thinking about your pillars. And I was thinking about how can I combine these? Because I agree with you 100% on all 5 of those. And I think they're all incredibly important. And I do think sleep could be its own, but sleep can go under physical because that's your physical well-being. But taping your mouth shut cracks me up. A friend of mine, I just hiked with her today, went to a sleep study, and they taped it shut. And I said, why? And she said, because you've really got to be breathing out of our nose. So good tip for the audience. Good tip for the audience. But anyway, I was thinking, why can't you go for a walk and kind of meditate while you're going for a walk? And maybe you have a friend with you that you can just let them know how hard it is and complain and get all those, cobwebs out before you start. Here is a question from the audience, and that was, and this is for someone, I know that you had your mother move to a community for memory support. I did the same. My dad was at Kensington for almost 7 years. But this question came in, what do we tell a family member who wants to come home? So I don't know if that happened to you with your mom and Susie, or if it happened with your dad, but any thoughts on that?
I mean, that's obviously tough. I mean, for us, when she went to the home, she was kind of past the point of understanding reality. So while she might have asked, I want to come home, and she might have been in her right mind in that moment. If we just stayed present with her, say, yeah, we wish you could come home with us, or even like we'll go home later, just knowing the situation that she's in, that as time progressed, she's probably gonna forgot she even asked that question. So like that's obviously in our case where she was kind of not of right mind. So I think it would be much different if she really understood where she was at all times. It's hard for me to speak to if somebody's of right mind asking that question because you don't want to lie to them. But I think just like being present, uh, almost offering you just almost have to transfer off of it. I feel the best you can, because I don't really think there's a right answer to that one.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think it's all up to the individual and the family dynamics. Certainly that happened to me, but my dad was at the point that if I distracted him for 30 seconds, he forgot that he had asked that. And
Yeah,
so I think it's all about, and it's also about the home they're in. Kensington did a great job. If they, there's so many caregivers there that if they saw that it was awkward at all, or that my dad was saying, I want to go home with you, which actually didn't really happen that often, but they would come and distract and bring him into some type of community project or something like that. So that seemed to work.
for
Uh,
sure.
that seemed to work really well. But I agree with you. You don't want to lie and say we're going to go home at 4. But I think you can definitely distract, and then hopefully they're on to something else. So this is an interesting one about siblings that don't live near each other. I think you and Hunter, I mean, I don't know, but how did that work? Do you have any advice? This guest in the audience today is asking, she's in California and her sister's in Kansas, and the mother's in Southern California, and any advice on how that sibling dynamics?
I mean, for us, my brother was, and obviously I don't know the age of who we're talking about, or if they're the primary, secondary. Um, my brother was young in high school. I was in college, so I was in Seattle. He was at home in Northern California, living at home with my mom. So he uh, definitely bared the brunt of, you know, her strongest struggle. Um, so providing him a sense of support and an outlet in me as a brother was important. Um, if we were older and one of us was the primary, just trying to stay in lockstep, where we're at, how days were, constantly checking in with each other, just to try to stay on the same page. And that would be more of we were like I was the primary and he was the secondary, and he lived away and I was there. Um, but again, just like providing that uh where you don't feel like you're so alone. Somebody's constantly checking in and being there, showing up when they can physically, but constantly being there emotionally is super important.
And my brother lived in New Mexico and I'm in Northern California. And, sometimes I would just get upset because I felt like I was carrying the whole burden. But I was allowed in our conversations to really just vent to him.
Mhm.
Like, this is so hard. This is just, you have no idea. And it's also hard being the primary because you're witnessing this decline that is just heartbreaking. So that's good advice. This is one I think directly for you. And I've had the opportunity to get to know Randy Bishop, and we've done events together. Because I started a charity as well, helping people, educate and caregiver support, just very similar to For Mom, but we worked and we partnered together for a long time. And I remember your dad at one of our events where your mother was, which I think was so helpful to the audience to see Susie, and she was adorable. And her whole family came, her sisters came, her mother came. I mean, it was really nice, I think, for that audience at the Bay Club. But your dad shared with me that, he's trying to hold down a job. He needs to pay for the caregivers. And then, as you mentioned, your dad wasn't getting sleep. At 2 a.m, he woke up and your mother was struggling in the pool. She had somehow gotten outside and was struggling in the pool. But this question is, how do I get my dad to let me help him?
Another tough question that probably doesn't have a definitive answer. I mean, I would say at a certain point, you gotta be honest and be honest with yourself and kind of force it. I mean, you have to be there. You can't let somebody you need to caregive for call the shots, which is hard because, again, like my mom wasn't of right mind. So she might have said, I don't want help, don't help me, and get mad for it. But she would physically have gotten hurt or drowned if, we didn't intervene. My dad or primary intervened. Obviously, if they are of more right mind, like early stages, they might be more in that denial phase, which my mom was too, embarrassed that I don't want to share. I don't, people saw me as this. I don't want them to see me as this. So that is hard. And I think if they are of more right mind, finding the ability to be present and just like be there, even if you don't say words or do certain things with action for them, just like showing you're there, showing your calming presence. If they do want to try and figure something out, let them try and figure it out, and then show that, oh, here, I can help you, here's why. So it's less intrusive, less forceful of, I'm your caregiver, I'm gonna do it, which is hard. So that's why these pillars are so important, so you find presence in moments like this where it can get chaotic.
Oh, it's chaotic, and that's just putting it mildly. It's chaotic everywhere around. But someone told me, because it's also, you beat yourself up, you get frustrated, the repeating of yourself and the arguing, you need to shower. I showered, and get mad and all that stuff. But someone told me to help with that resistance, that they have Alzheimer's, their brain is affected, their memory's affected, but their heart and soul is still there. This just came in, and this is great for you, actually. Do you have any advice for accepting being a caregiver and all the big life challenges required? And this person that sent this in said, and this is just being so vulnerable, I love this. This person said, internally, I feel like I'm in the twilight zone, and I'm resistant to accepting that this is my life, that I am a caregiver.
Yeah, not great question. I feel like, again, this is just my opinion. I'm not right or wrong. And it might not be right or wrong for you as well. I think it starts with this work that you do with yourself in these moments. Creating a mentality, shifting your identity. These are all small decisions that you have to make, and give yourself the grace that you have the emotion of, I'm resistant to being a caregiver, while simultaneously saying, I am a caregiver and I'm going to dominate the best way possible. I'm not going to give in. I'm going to show up every day because that's what's called to me in this moment. And like I told my dad back in 2018, you don't want to look back when you're done being a caregiver, however it turns out, whether it be like for my dad when he put my mom in the home and now step back from being her primary. You don't want to sit there and go, I was resistant and I let it defeat me, and I wasn't the best that I could be every day for my person. But that's your choice, and you have to make the choice. Nobody can make it for you. I would definitely encourage to let yourself feel negative emotions, but don't let yourself be negative emotions, because, again, like I said, as a caregiver, you have plethora of excuses, and nobody would probably fault you for using them. Don't do it. Don't do it, because when it's over, you'll feel more fulfilled and realize you did it the right way.
And I think all your pillars and all your advice today is a big assistance with guilt.
Yep.
I always said guilt plays a major role in this caregiver journey, with all the obstacles that it presents itself. But guilt seems to be just an overwhelming, horrible feeling that is just so ever present, because unfortunately, we always feel like we're not doing enough, even though we are doing a lot. And I would also suggest to look at this webinar again and look at those pillars and figure out what you're most afraid of. And try to realize that. Maybe just spiritually talk to yourself and say, I'm not going to be good at this, or I'm not going to be good at this, or I'm fearful of this. But then, kind of addressing it so that you can get on, because unfortunately, caregiving doesn't give you a start and stop date, which you talked about before. Burnout symptoms. Thoughts on, like, when would you say, burnout symptoms which maybe it's challenging all the 5 pillars, but I'm going to let you answer that.
Again, I'm not right here or wrong. It's just my opinion. I think no matter who you are, if you're fighting this battle, you're going to be tired, exhausted, overwhelmed, in chaos, stressed. I mean, physically might hurt, confused. I mean, you can use anything to describe it, really. But I think burnout's a myth. I think, again, you can find any excuse as a caregiver and it'd be rightfully justified. But I think if you focus intentionally on these pillars, burnout won't be a thing for you, because you'll recognize what's happening and it won't even get to the stage of like, I'm burnt out. You're going to feel all the things that what might be defined as burnout. But if you focus intentionally every day, something small every day, I move, I have a community, I eat whole foods, I watch my Netflix special when I have a free moment, like these small things, you're providing small joys in your life. So now your identity becomes a caregiver, and it doesn't feel like such a burden, even though it will be. It's just, you're walking on this journey. You have the choice of what your mind tells yourself. So I think it's perfectly okay to feel burnout symptoms, but if you're intentionally focused on these things, and they don't have to be defined in these pillars, this is just the way I look at it. It might look different for you, but if you focus on yourself, pour into yourself, then you show up for your person, and you realize that it's okay to feel tired, confused, stressed, angry. You want to blame, you want to complain, like you realize it's an okay thing to feel, but you never let yourself get to the point of burnout because you're focused on yourself like that.
I agree. And I also would add into that, you said it, I'll say it differently, but pat yourself on the back every day. Say, you know what, I did this really good today, or, this was really hard, but just talk to yourself about it, because I agree. If you just get caught in the negativity, it's just a downward spiral. Well, someone just chimed in and said that they're lifting weights during the webinar. So you've made an impact. You've made an impact.
That. Perfect.
And,
I would be doing the same thing probably.
I'm gonna end on one question that came in, but I'm also going to encourage our audience to share this webinar with friends and family, and to take a look at For Mom. I'm just so proud of what you guys have done, and you're constantly pivoting to what is needed in the community, especially the Alzheimer's community. And I can't say enough, by sharing your story and talking about your story, you get so much more support. And Kensington has 7 locations, and they offer free caregiving support groups, each one of them. So they're virtual. So any Kensington senior living location offers support groups. And I think that's step 1, is to find your people that are going through the same journey. But this is the last question. And it says, what do you say to yourself when approaching the plate? What do you say to yourself when you have 2 strikes against you?
When I go to the plate, I mean, it usually starts in the dugout for me. So like you're in the hole, so you'd be in the dugout, waiting to go on deck. And I would obviously tell myself some keys, just off who I'm facing, who's pitching, uh, kind of relock in my plan of what I'm trying to do, depending on who's pitching again. When I go on deck, I'm really focused on like my timing of trying to get physically on time with the pitcher. But as I walk to the plate, honestly, there's not a whole lot. I feel like my preparation was done prior. So as I'm walking up to the plate, I'm trying to be as calm, as present as possible. And I'm really telling myself to slow down. Which again, and you could, at least for me, this was my chaos. Playing in front of people and people screaming, and you might have runners on base, and you gotta, show up for your team and be productive. So trying to slow down, remind myself to really make it my tempo and that I control it was key. And then obviously I'd get in the box, do my thing. If I had 2 strikes, I mean, odds are stacked against you, analytically speaking. So my big thing was I would look at the label on my bat and I'll recommit to that breath. And it wasn't as long as like an 8-second inhale and 4-second hold, but I would take 2 quick inhales, hold my breath, and then let it go, kind of like a sigh. And psychologically, that's shown to kind of slow everything down, especially when the heart rate's up, which in those situations it would be. But just that recommitment to being present in that moment gave me my best chance of going. So if I did end up striking out or grounding out, at least I did it on my terms and I could live with that. So I guess it'd be a parallel to caregiving of you got to recommit every day. And when it's over, you want to go down on your terms. So you want to know you empty your bucket every day for your person.
I love that. I love that. Just a reset. To our audience, Braden has just confirmed that he'll do an in-person event for us in Northern California, which we're really excited about. So thank you for that. And everybody have a great night if you're on the East Coast, and a good afternoon if you're on the West Coast. I know Braden is. And take care of that little boy. I saw pictures of him in there.
I will, for sure.
Okay. Thank you,
All right.
everybody.
Thanks.